ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to feature my interview with Stephen Weir. Stephen is an Executive MBA format student in our Executive MBA class of 2020, and he is also an entrepreneur. Stephen launched his own business while in the program, and he and I recently sat down to talk a little bit more about his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden, how things are going with his startup, as well as his advice for prospective students. So without further ado, here's my interview with Stephen Weir. Stephen?
Brett.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here.
So I always like to set the stage for our listeners just to give people some context of where we're meeting and what time of day we're meeting. So this is a glorious Sunday morning here, 7 a.m., bright and early. You are in residency. We are in a learning team room here at Sands Family Grounds. Thank you for waking up early for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm just happy to do it. Funny story, I was texting with my wife this morning, and she had to get up early too because our baby woke up really early. And I was trying to empathize, and she pointed out very clearly that being interviewed for a podcast is not the same as waking up with a 2-year-old.
Touche. So, well, we're appreciative of your time, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast and for our listeners to hear a little bit more about your story. So we kind of start these conversations out the same way. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background.
Great. So Stephen Weir, I spent 8.5 years working for a large bank in Richmond, Virginia. And really grew up there professionally, just learned a lot about who I was and what I could do and really my desires and how much I really enjoyed the quantitative side of things. I then left that and spent 4.5 years leading a neighborhood nonprofit in the East End of Richmond. That was a really big career shift. It sort of really required that I think hard about career and where I was going and what I was going to do. And while I was there, I just really started to think about, well, what's the next step in my career? And it was the first time I really wanted to take a hold of where I was going in my career. And so that then led to being here at Darden. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, the idea of taking control of your career.
That's right.
And you hear that from a lot of people, when you think about the decision to pursue an MBA, that this is about, taking control. What did that mean to you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I was happily had a lot of options, and I enjoyed the jobs I've had and the job I was in at the time. So there wasn't a sort of push, but there was a little bit of a desire to think more critically and say, okay, I'm 15 years into my career. I know I'm good at things, not everything, but I'm good at some things. But I've got 35 more years left of figuring out what I'm going to do and where I'm going to be. I should think about this hard, right? I shouldn't just let this happen to me like I did the first 15 years of my career. And so I did. So that was the broad thought. The more specific thoughts is I took a look at programs and leadership opportunities. I didn't necessarily think an EMBA was the right thing when I started, but by the end, I was applying only to EMBA programs. I applied to a couple other programs, but Darden was really the top of the class for me. And so that then led to me kind of coming to Darden, but that wasn't the end of the sort of taking control, right? Once I got here, I felt like I had so many more resources to think critically about both what the job market looked like and what I could do, but also about myself and who I was and how that would best fit in.
So what resonated with you about the Darden program?
Yeah, so there were 3 things I was really looking for. The first was a network, right? And so for me, going to the program that had the best professors and that had a great group of folks in an area where I wanted to live was really important. And so coming from Richmond, the Virginia region was where I wanted to know folks. And so that was number one, really. Secondly, I wanted the content, and I wanted to learn a bunch. And I felt like particularly the case method resonated as the real way decision-making happens, where you don't always have all the information, and you have some, and you do some analysis, but you also have to make some judgments. And then you have to actually make a decision and not just come up with 1,000 options. And so the case method really resonated with me as a way to learn. And honestly, just looking at the course list, I was excited about every single one of the courses and the chance to learn. And the last was the credential. So getting an MBA and then also getting having Darden on a resume felt like something really powerful in terms of something I could put on my resume to go forward. And that, interestingly, it was important, but it was also the lowest. It really was the network and the content that really drove the value for me.
Your point about having space to think about your career is an interesting one. Obviously, it's come up in other podcast conversations. And the more I've talked with people about it, the more I realize that oftentimes when you're just out working in the world, you don't have resources, you don't have time to sort of engage with these questions. I think about the questions you get into maybe in the professional advancement course or just in the course of conversations with career advisors and all the programming that they do around career education. So that point is an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world to worry about what you're doing tomorrow in your job, and the reality is that's what's urgent, right? So you kind of focus on the things that are urgent and are important, which is, getting the spreadsheet done or responding to that email or, even building the plan for next year. It's really tough to make space. I found it very tough to make space for myself to think critically about the career, and then also once I did make that space, to even know what to do in that space. And so to be here at Darden and have 130 peers who are doing the same thing and having top-of-the-line professors, the professional advancement course is taught by one of the strongest sort of executive coach folks I've ever met, and to have those folks at my disposal, and not only at your disposal, like actually making it urgent and important because it's an assignment that's due, that really led to some positive outcomes for me and a lot of my classmates.
Yeah, there's something about that blend between curricular and extracurricular focus on your career. I think for us, we feel if career was just extracurricular, it may be even harder for you given just how busy you are in this program. But the fact that it's woven into the curriculum, and let's be honest, the case method and the way that you're learning, your understanding of yourself is changing through the class experience. That's
absolutely right. Had it been a optional thing, I might have shown up once to be on a podcast, but I probably wouldn't have done all the work. But it is literally the job or the point of some of the classes to do a decent amount of self-reflection. I'd say arguably up to 1/3 of the classes are sort of focused on your personal development and journey and discernment.
Yeah, the progression that students have. So it's this blend of curriculum, right? So you'll have a couple of quantitative courses, then you'll have a course that has more of that personal dimension to it. So I think of, for example, our 2021s are just wrapping up accounting, finance, and leadership communication. And then you have business ethics comes along, and you have leading organizations, and you always have a course or two over 4 or 5 month period, sort of getting you to ask these questions about yourself and the self-reflection piece. And I think there's a lot about this experience that is about helping you grow as a leader. You think about what makes for good leaders. Self-awareness is a huge part of it.
That's absolutely right. And everyone thinks they're self-aware, but I've become aware of how unself-aware I am through this program and hopefully made a lot of progress. In fact, the course I'm going to go to right after this recording is called Leading with Influence. And I had a chance whether it's an exciting thing or a terrifying thing, I sent a survey out to a number of my classmates to evaluate me as a leader. And I'm going to get the results of that. I think I'm going to become more self-aware. I'm a little bit of fear and trepidation heading into that class, but I think it'll be a great thing to hear how people perceive me and to let that sort of drive some career thoughts.
Yeah, I guess the first step on the path to self-awareness is accepting that perhaps you're not self-aware.
That's right.
And the other thing is this is a safe space. We talk about this a lot with the case method, but I think it applies to what you just talked about, right? Everybody here is trying to get better. And trying to learn as much as they can from as many people as they can, which creates a sort of comfort with being open and asking people for that kind of feedback.
That's absolutely right. And it's in your job, you're in some sense just constantly being judged, and even in the most positive way in the work environment where they're giving you positive judgment, right? But there's still a constant performing and earning And here, there's certainly grades, but I have no idea what any of my classmates' grades are, right? It's more about figuring out what I want to learn and talking to my classmates and hearing their perspectives. And it's just rare. It's rare to have 130 folks who are in a space similar to you and who are smart, who are thinking through these things critically and want to hear your thoughts and also want to share their thoughts. That's honestly just special.
The thing that strikes me at this time of year is you're in quarter 10. Mm-hmm. The end is near.
Yeah.
We talked about, we've had a regular series of conversations with a couple of your classmates, Jonas Porcar-Ferrer, Bob and Patel, and they were talking a little bit about the sort of mixed feelings that people have at the end of the program. Bittersweet is the word.
That's right.
Comes to mind. But, the thing that is true is I think what hits people when they get here at this very end of the program is that you have just spent 2 years or so with a group of people who are equally interested in learning, equally interested in professional development, have that kind of passion. You go out in the world, you're not going to be surrounded by 130 people that are all in that same place, all committed to those goals. And I think it's what makes this bittersweet in many ways.
That's right. I'm certainly, for the sake of my family and my own free time, there's a gladness to getting some time back. But I will miss coming in here every month rather, for a weekend and enjoying these folks and learning from these folks. And I think most folks are going to miss it as well.
So you mentioned your family. You also mentioned a 2-year-old at the outset of our conversation. So, like many of our students, you are juggling many other commitments other than school, and family is one of them. For many of our listeners, they are wondering how people do this. How do you balance family and work and just life in general and school? So I wonder what that progression was like for you.
Yeah. So for us, there were some sort of challenging moments. My second child was actually born in Q2, and so she's now about 18 months, and just super super fun. I guess she's 16 months, whatever. And so that was a big day when she was born, and that was I had to do. I remember it shaped up where it was during a finals week that she was likely going to be born, and so. For that finals, I did all the finals. The finals kind of become available on Friday at 5, and then you have until the next Sunday at 3, so you have 9 days to do them. And I did them all on that Friday and Saturday because a child's coming, right? And so there's some flexibility. I could do that because you have 9 days to do the finals, but also it kind of forced me to move it forward. So that's one practical story. For me, it was more about getting good rhythms with the family, and so. In the moments when, we'd put the kids to sleep, and then my wife and I would catch up for about 30 minutes, and then from about 8:30 or 9 to about 11, most nights I would spend that time doing Darden work, and that was enough. If there needed more, I would, or if I needed a longer block of time, I would generally do a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, but that was maybe once a month, and then, I actually had a weekend residency another weekend a month. But for me, that worked pretty well. That said, there are moments of sacrifices. There are moments where I was getting up in the middle of the night with kids, and I just didn't do as well that quarter, and that was okay, right? And I was able to make it. And there are also moments where I had a class that I really wanted to overinvest in, and so I talked to my wife and kind of set it up so I could engage that more. From a work perspective, I've been all over the place. I did a job transition, and I took 3 weeks between jobs, and so for those 3 weeks, I had all kinds of time to do the work, right? And then there were other moments that were absolutely crazy at work, and I just didn't know how I was going to be able to get stuff done, and I relied on classmates to be for my learning team for some of those times, and again, sometimes I just didn't invest as much as the courses as maybe I would have in a perfect world, but the perfect world is not the world I live in.
And I'm not sure how many of our Executive MBA students live in that perfect world where you just have endless time. Your point about finding a schedule and a rhythm is well put. As the more students I talk to, the more I realize everybody does this similarly and differently, right? So I've talked to students who work really early in the morning, some who work late at night, some who focus on just concentrating all their work in one day, like a Saturday, just blocking that out. But the sort of omnipresent part of all of this is a lot of communication, helping the people in your life understand, what you're doing and sort of getting feedback from them and sort of negotiating that. How long did it take you to feel like you had found a rhythm that worked for you and your family?
That's a good question. In some ways, I feel like even this last quarter in Q9, I was rehabbing the conversations and thinking through it. So I don't know if there was a moment where we arrived. I think we just did a lot of conversations the whole time. And, some seasons, even within the program, some seasons are a little bit lighter and some seasons are heavier. And, every quarter when I'd get the new syllabuses and I'd read over them and kind of figure out how complex that particular class is going to be. I'd have to, internalize that for a little while and figure out what I thought was going to happen, and then have a conversation with my wife or with work. So I don't know that I ever actually felt like I arrived at that. I do feel like it was every quarter I was having those conversations, and it was just having folks who are really supportive. I talk about my wife a lot, and she's certainly the champ of this story. But my in-laws are really supportive too, because they'd come down on weekends if my kid was sick and I was at a residency. And my work was really supportive in that they said it was fine to make time for this, and they were excited about it. And then when I switched jobs and started working for myself, my clients are very supportive of that, and they understand that I'm out a couple days a month for this, and they were excited to do that. And so there really is I feel really honored that there is a chorus, if you will, of people saying, Stephen, this is a good thing, and we want you to succeed. And that's something I don't take for granted, and I think it's really one of the reasons I've been able to succeed.
Yeah, it's a group effort, I think, is what we hear from most of our students. A couple things that you said, but I want to talk a little bit more about sort of the group effortness of this. But Ashley Keating said a very similar thing. She's a classmate of yours, as previous podcast guest, where she basically said every quarter I sit down and I have to figure out my schedule kind of anew in light of what's going on in my life and what classes I'm taking that quarter, and whether I think those classes are going to be more challenging or maybe a little bit easier for me. But every couple of months you have to reassess, and that feels true to the experience, because if you only thought about it once and just kind of plowed through, I guess it assumes that the world is static and what's going on in your life is static. But as you mentioned, you and your wife had a child during the program. I think about we've got students here, quarter 10, walking around pregnant. Lots going on in their lives, and things do not stop personally or professionally just because you have come to Darden.
That's right.
So thinking about that, it's fun to be around at graduation, because as much as the student is proud, I think part of that is they also feel like their whole family or everyone that supported them got this MBA together. Is that the feeling you think you'll have?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I think everyone will be very, really excited. Everyone feels like they're part of that journey. I'll even say there's a blog post. Maybe it was on the admissions website. I'm not sure, but that talked about how you are not getting the MBA. Everyone is getting the MBA, right? The whole family. It's a group effort, and you got to be on the same page. And my wife and I actually read that together and talked about what that meant before I started. And I think that was a helpful contextualizer for her, in that this isn't just kind of going to be Stephen's thing that he does on the side that doesn't actually affect life. This is a big deal. And then that led to her asking real questions about, why are we doing this again? And what sort of, this is an investment, what do we expect the payoff to be? Which kind of forced me to kind of articulate some of those things to her, which really led to I feel like a mutual commitment to getting this done. Not to say that she's not glad it's over soon enough, and so am I. But there was a mutuality going in that I feel like was worth every second we spent doing that.
No, and very important conversations up front. We stress with students all the time, as you embark upon this journey, even through the application process. Check in with your partner, significant other, check in with your family, anybody who will be supporting you along this way. Not just, hey, I'm doing this, but let's sit down and let's talk about it. This is why I think it's important, not just for me, but for us, and that sort of inclusive communication approach. talking about those things up front can really pay dividends down the road, and obviously continuing to check in. That's something that you stressed, and we stress that too. I think when that communication breaks down, obviously it gets more complicated for people in the program. So maybe over communicate. I'm not sure the best way to express that, but talk often with the people in your life who are making it possible for you to be in this program.
That's right.
So you mentioned that you had a job change while you were in the program. Yeah, you mentioned that you were an entrepreneur now, you're running your own thing. Tell us a little bit more about your business.
Yeah, so I run a small consulting firm. It's called Weir Consulting. I'm based out of Richmond, Virginia. Primarily, we service fractional CFOs to small businesses. If you're under about $30 million in revenue, you often will not hire a full-time CFO because it's very expensive and because you don't necessarily need it. But you do need help doing the financial planning and analysis, understanding your kind of place in the marketplace, your competition set, and all those things. And I come in and just help smaller organizations do that. We're trying to expand a little bit too into other services. We actually do a fair amount of recruiting services right now and helping people find the right people to help drive their business forward. And I'm just very open right now to what this will eventually become. But yeah, it's gone pretty well. And at least 6 months in, I've been able to make a living at it and able to apply a lot of my learnings here at Darden.
So how did you realize this was a market opportunity?
Yeah. So as I was, I had an interesting opportunity because my previous job, leading the nonprofit in the East End of Richmond, it was a very slow transition. In fact, it was maybe 6 or 7 months between when I kind of realized I was going to leave and then when I actually left. And so I had a lot of time to think about it while I was at Darden, right? And so part of it was just kind of being around Darden and thinking hard about what I wanted my next career start to be. I had a couple opportunities that were going back to corporate spaces, but I decided to pursue this one. Secondly, I just kind of started to talk to people, which is all the entrepreneurial professors here are just pound the pavement with that. Like, you have to talk to people. And so I just started talking to people. And I had a colleague, a friend, say, "Hey, I would love you to be our fractional CFO." And this person had been on my board of directors. They saw kind of how I managed finances, and they were really impressed by that. But I actually didn't know what a fractional CFO was. And so I had to go home and do a bunch of research on what that meant, what it didn't mean. I thought it was maybe like a CPA or a credentialed accountant, which I wasn't that. And so it turns out that's not exactly what a fractional CFO does. They're much more about the bigger picture and the future and much less about bookkeeping and accounting. And so from that conversation, I then followed a path that I'd been introduced to by Darden students in terms of interviewing as many potential customers as you can, asking empathetic questions, trying to get to the emotional core of what's causing them challenges, and seeing if there's a market opportunity there. And it turns out there was. And so from there, I just sort of kind of launched my website and launched sort of an email blast that kind of explained what I was doing, and then talked to people who I knew who were in positions of decision making, and some of them weren't interested, but a few of them were interested, and they became clients. And so now I have just a number of kind of monthly retainer clients that I work with.
That must be interesting to just sort of drop into someone's business, and how do you get up to speed quickly? Because I imagine you're talking to people who are every day doing this work, and you're a consultant coming in and sort of helping them think big picture, future competitor set, as you noted. How do you learn quickly about their business?
That's a great question, and it's different every single time. But what I'll say is usually I'm getting into businesses that are not super financially oriented. They either have a service they provide, or they have a widget they make, or they have a process they developed that's not financially oriented that they're excellent at. And as you cross the threshold, so if your business is less than, let's say, $1 million in revenue, You can manage it a lot like your personal checking account, right? Money in, money out. You don't really borrow much. You just kind of manage it that way. And payroll is, if you're less than $1 million annually, payroll, at maximum is $80-something thousand. And you can just kind of keep track of that. But after you cross the $1 million threshold, and then particularly after you cross the $5 million threshold, you have to manage your finances differently. And a lot of times the folks who are leading the business because they're great at making the widget, or they're great at providing the service, or they're just a good manager in general, don't have that financial background to think about what the future is going to bring, right? And so sometimes it's as simple as examining the seasonality of previous years and saying, hey, that will probably happen again this year. Have you planned for that, and helping them plan for that? Other times it's doing a little more almost like tough conversations that are saying like, hey, you wanted to grow this way, and so your expenses grew, but your revenue is just not growing like that. What are we going to do about it? And instead of helping them and trying to move them from being paralyzed to having like real options, right? So that's been helpful as well. And the last thing I do is, particularly on the nonprofit side, nonprofits particularly promote people who are good at services and are mission driven, but are not who don't have a strong financial background. And so on the nonprofit side, it's really about creating a clear financial picture that they can take to their supporters, take to their board, and think about, are they really accomplishing their mission, and are they set up to accomplish the mission for the long term? And I think I've been able to provide some real value there. It does take, the first few days, weeks, months are a lot of conversations, and a lot of diving into financial statements, and a lot of trying to unpack what's there. Usually it's nothing crazy complicated. It's just not very well understood. And if I can understand it and give them context, we can really help them go further faster.
So what you are doing, to me, sounds a little bit like what you have to do in class every time you're handed a new case, right? So obviously, this is a Darden podcast. I'm going to think about the case method. But
of course,
with the cases, you're learning about maybe a new industry, new company, trying to get up to speed quickly because you have to go to class and have a perspective. Has the experience here at Darden helped you with what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. One is just very practically, I know about more industries than I did before, right? Because in the case studies, we talk about what we're having a robust conversation about craft beer industry, and I did not know much about that industry. I knew as a consumer what it was like. I didn't know about the business side of it. Turns out, at least according to our class, it's a tough industry to be in, a tough industry to stay in. And I just didn't realize that. And so all of a sudden I have like these contexts and these strategic frameworks. And because it's Darden, there's a whole bunch of 2x2 matrices floating around everywhere, that help me understand what's actually going on in a given business or in a given industry, which in turn helps me give insight that the leaders of the business often are not going to have access to. So
I'm curious about how you grow a business from just starting out. Maybe you had one client, and does that client lead to more clients as you start to develop a bit of a reputation? Curious about how you sort of make those steps. It may feel a little bit daunting at first launching your own thing, but do you start to feel a bit of momentum at a certain point?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I knew the perfect answer, I would. I'd just love to know the perfect answer. I just feel like I'm still learning. But yeah, I had one client that I thought was going to be a long-term client. Turns out they were going to be a short-term project-oriented client, and that was a little scary because I didn't necessarily have another client lined up. But I just tried to put myself out there as much as possible, have as many conversations as I could, some with my Darden classmates, some with just networks that I had professionally, and just kind of see what came of it. And that led to, once I put myself out there, then I had one client who called me when they were having a tough time, and that turned into something. I had another client who was primed and positioned to grow, and their financials were very strong, but they were just very intimidated by crossing some of those thresholds we were talking about in terms of revenue. And, for very good reasons, didn't want to hire anybody, right? And so they just, once I put myself out there, all of a sudden I started to get some inbound calls. I do also do a little bit of outbound, sort of trying to meet with people and explore what can be done. But the inbound calls really are the ones that have turned into like real consistent business over time. I will put in a little plug for effectual thinking. So I feel like the Darden program has really changed, and even though, this might sound dramatic, but really just turned upside down how I thought about entrepreneurship. There's the analytical, planned entrepreneurship, which a bunch of our professors, especially the entrepreneurship focused ones, just tell us is just not how entrepreneurship works, right? You don't sort of think through the entire market, find a segment that's underserved, find a product that fits a segment, and then, go as hard as you can after that segment. What you do is the effectual thinking says, instead of having a plan to get to a place, you look around at where you are, who you are, what your skills are, who you know, and then you try to build some value out of that. And what you think is going to be the value on day one, and I had a very different idea than any of this stuff on day one, is not necessarily what you think is going to be value on day 30, and certainly not where you think is going to have value at the end of year 1 or month 30. And so I've just had to evolve everything I'm doing almost weekly to see what's out there. And even this next week, we're going to be working on a product that might go somewhere with a Darden classmate, actually. That might go somewhere, and it might go nowhere. And I feel like I would have thought I needed to know this with certainty where I was going, but I just don't need to know that. And so I'm just trying to create value with the resources that are immediately at my disposal.
So, Stephen, it's interesting to me that you mentioned effectuation, because even as you were telling the story of launching your business, it sounded like effectuation to me. You went around, you talked to a lot of people, you gathered information. Effectuation, for those who are listening, Stephen did a great job explaining it, but it's effectively a de-risking strategy. You're trying to get feedback quickly.
That's right.
And I've been fortunate on the podcast to talk with a lot of people at the Batten Institute. Haven't had Saris on the podcast yet, but
you should. She's great,
incredible. But they all talk about entrepreneurship is really not as risky as people think it is. You're not holed away in a garage with millions of dollars. You have an idea, and you're trying to figure out if your idea is a good one or not as quickly as you can. And typically, when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money at play. You have an idea, and you may have a little bit of financial backing, but it's not necessarily what people imagine.
That's right. It's a sort of transparency. I don't have any investors. I after a month or two, I was profitable. Part of that is a low cost structure business. A part of that is I sat down I actually used this process that one of my classmates shared with me called the Startup Garage, where I developed a product and that was only on paper and probably took me 2 hours to develop. And then I went out and had structured conversations where I asked people about what really was causing them pain in their current situation, in my case, in their business. And my first idea was wrong. It didn't actually resonate. And it was a marketing analytics for small businesses. And marketing analytics is important. But at least for my network or for where I was or for who I was with, it didn't resonate. And so then I would ask, I kind of asked these same group of people, like, what would resonate? And then that led to the fractional CFO work. And honestly, I hope a year from now, I have evolved to a different place, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if that's happened. So it's a chance to sort of just kind of be aware of what creates value in the space and what you can create value in the space that you're in. The other thing I'll mention that really struck with me from one of my professors from Venkat in a entrepreneurial thinking class is he challenged us all. He said, you're all so afraid to leave your current jobs that feel safe. But it feels like a risk, and it feels like you're going to be leaving money on the table. But what is the opportunity cost of you not being an entrepreneur? Like, what value, what company, what product is not being created because you are not being an entrepreneur? And his argument was that while there's certainly some risk involved, it's more risky and less value is created by staying in your jobs than it would be by going out and being entrepreneurs, which kind of hit me like a truck. And I was like, oh, okay. I can go out and create something that's valuable, and that might be better than, and also not that risky than just kind of staying in a sort of traditional job.
That's real talk right there from Venkat going there. that kind of segues into the next question I was going to ask you is, are you surprised that you're running your own business? Did you imagine an entrepreneurial path at some point for yourself?
I never imagined an entrepreneurial path for myself. It wasn't part of my my sort of experience growing up. I didn't know entrepreneurs. Heck, I didn't really know business people. We were educators. I didn't think about it in my career because I enjoyed all the jobs I had and I enjoyed the people I worked with. I will say my running the smaller nonprofit in the East End of Richmond really did create a sense of independence and a sense of kind of being kind of the ultimate backstop for the organization that I was not used to, and I was able to kind of succeed in some of those spaces and some of the fundraising we had to do there and some of the hiring and so that created some confidence that I could run the thing and keep the budget balanced and just realizing that the entrepreneurs out there are not like that much smarter than I am. There's plenty of people out there who are smarter than I am, but I saw some who were about the same intelligence as me. And so kind of all those things kind of led me to have some confidence. But I really would have never imagined it. And it was just conversations with people here at Darden and the conversations with my network outside of Darden that really gave me the confidence to give it a shot. And I mean, as much as I'm happy to celebrate it, like there's a universe, a very real chance that a year from now this will not have worked out, or some circumstance would have led me in a different direction, and I'll need to go and get a job in a more traditional space, and that will be a good thing too, right? It's not like I have arrived and I'm an entrepreneur and that's my identity, right? Like there's good in both places.
So what you just said reminds me, Alexis Ohanian, the founder of Reddit, UVA alum, came to Darden to speak last year, and he started Reddit after graduating from UVA, and his take was, if it worked out, great. I've got a business that I'm running and I'm working for myself. What could be better than that? And if it didn't, I had a really cool story and I had learned a ton of things, and I would be a really valuable person to hire for that. To me, that shifted the way that I think about sort of entrepreneurship, in that, the things that you have been doing, even if you ultimately end up doing something different, will be valuable to you regardless of a future career path.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the pace of learning in the entrepreneurial space is so fast, and there's so many things I know and I know how to do, and so many things that I had just relied on other people to solve for me that I can't rely on other people to solve for me. And even thinking deeply about, well, what do I want? My company has my name on it, right? It's Weir Consulting. What do I want that to stand for? What kind of level of excellence do I want that to be? How do I achieve that level of excellence? And what do I want it not to stand for? And maybe there are places where I draw lines, whereas in other organizations, in other contexts, honestly, all those, what the company stands for was written by somebody else, and I just had to kind of get in line, which I was, happy to do. But this is me, and it's my name, and it's my company. Like, who am I and how does that work?
So, Stephen, obviously greatly appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah,
recognize that these weekends are busy. They're full weekends. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but before we get there, just tell us what you're taking this quarter, what classes.
So this quarter I am taking Starting New Ventures with Saras, and she is kind of pushing us all that she's like, regardless of whether or not you are an entrepreneur, this class you are starting a venture. And so I'm taking Corporate Strategic Leadership with Dean Beardsley, and I'm taking Leading with Influence with Sean Martin. Yeah.
How'd you pick those classes?
Yeah, so do you want the very practical, like how we do that, how we choose electives, or do you want the like
a little bit of
general,
both? I think for our listeners, how you choose electives, practically would be interesting, and then sort of maybe intellectually or professionally, what was attractive to you about that set of classes also be interesting. Let
So very practically, the elective process is designed by an economist or someone here at Darden. So you get these points, maybe 1,000 points, and you get to bid on the electives you want. And you kind of the 1,000 points, you say, I want to take all 1,000 and bid on this one class because it's so important to me, and then I don't care what else I get. and there's maybe 6 electives in total that we have to take, or you split them up or whatever. And so you bid for each class, and then if the class, if the class has 35 spots, the top 35 bids get that class. Sometimes there's not even enough people to fill the demand, and they actually just drop classes because there's not enough demand. Other classes are such high demand that some people who want them don't actually get to take them. So I was fortunate in that I guess I just chose classes that weren't that appealing to everybody, or I bid right or something, but I got every class that I wanted. And I think that's a relatively common story. Most people do get the classes they want. And so the classes I ended up bidding for or taking this quarter, the Starting New Ventures and the Leading with Influence are just very much about developing your business or developing yourself, and really having a chance to, honestly, in some ways, capstone the program with really working on some very practical things. Right, Leading with Influence, particularly, I'm excited about because I feel like I've learned that's the most I can do, right? You think sometimes that once you kind of get to a place of having your own business or being some sort of authority, you have a chance to, maybe control the situation, but you don't. You have a chance to influence people and present your side, and they decide, right? You have very little control, but I would like to, as effectively as possible, influence the situations I'm in. And then the Starting New Ventures is just really a chance to apply the effectual thinking in an organized way with a professor and classmates thinking critically about it, at least for a couple hours, right? And hopefully drive things forward. And even we had a little group that met yesterday in class. It was like a small 4-person team. And the team had really interesting thoughts on what I should do and what I shouldn't do and how things should work. And some of those thoughts I'll take and change. And some of those thoughts I've already decided that I'm just not going to take those thoughts, and that's fine. And then the last with corporate strategic leadership with Dean Beardsley. I mean, it's funny because it's not where I'm headed with my career, but it is really interesting to hear. And these are folks who worked at the top consulting firms, kind of getting in and succeeded there for years and years and years, teaching us about how strategy conversations work at the highest levels of American industry, which is really powerful and kind of shapes our culture, which is a really fun way to learn about things.
Absolutely. So a great slate of classes. So, Stephen, thank you again for waking up early on a Sunday morning. The sunrise session here. We have planes landing at Reagan, which seems to be almost all the time. We try to record one of these podcasts, but ask the same last question of everyone here who comes on the podcast. Any advice that you would share with prospective students? Our audience is friends of the Executive MBA program. Some of your current classmates will listen to it, alumni, but also a fair number of prospective students. So what would you share with them? Yeah,
I do remember listening to this podcast as a prospective student. And so, happy to share. I'd say one is do the right amount of due diligence. And so that's not an exhaustive amount of due diligence, but it is the kind of thinking about you, thinking about the program, obviously looking at the dollars involved, and sort of do that due diligence. But if things are pointing in the right direction, I'd say do it. I have been incredibly happy for the opportunity. I feel like, on the financial side, I feel like it's definitely going to pay off substantially. On the sort of content and sort of personal growth side, like you just don't know how you're going to transform over a given time period. But this is sort of taking control in a sense. You're putting yourself in a place where, in an organized way, you're going to be thoughtful about your career and even about who you want to become, around a group of faculty and support staff who actually have done this a lot with a lot of folks, and they can just do a lot more, and you can go a lot further faster is one of the words I use a lot in my business, but I feel like that's Darden as well. You can go a lot further and you can get there faster if you are able to be in this program.
Yeah, that resonates because just hearing you tell your story, so you talked about the classmate who sort of encouraged you as you thought about your business, shared with you a sort of methodology, a framework. You talked about the classes that you've taken here. Professor Venkat and the conversation he had in entrepreneurial thinking. It does feel like the program has had a real impact on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's part of it that I feel like is, you know, a butterfly flaps its wing on the other side of the world, and, you know, a hurricane starts on your side. There's some parts that are just like, of course this program affects me because I was there, right? And that's kind of how it goes. But I think it's more than just sort of the way life has gone. I feel like it's been an opportunity to make decisions that I wouldn't have made otherwise, give me confidence to do things that I wouldn't have had confidence to do otherwise, and give me a broader perspective, and even choosing things that I'm not going to do, right? Seeing opportunities and saying, you know what, I'm going to close that door right now because that's just not where I'm going to go. Has all been really, really powerful. The last thing I'll say this program has done, which is kind of a different take on it, but it's also helped me show that I am smart enough to do this stuff, right? And I can do these things. I feel like I've been in a top business school with the top professors, giving me difficult, cold calling me in the middle of class on difficult topics, and like I haven't fallen apart, right? I'm able to do those things. I'm able to have those conversations. And same with my classmates. I have incredibly brilliant classmates, and I can hang with them, right? And that's just a pretty strong validation. It's like, okay, I can do this. I can take control of a career over the next 35 years. I can kind of go where I want to go, and I'll be successful in those places.
I'm so glad you mentioned that last point. I've been working on a video project. It'll be out in the next couple months, I think.
Awesome.
Talking with students about the impact of the program. And I have been struck, you know, from an admission standpoint, the people that we talk to, very, very talented, you know, smart, capable people. But I'm struck by the sort of psychological power that the program has for people. You go to class, you're being asked your opinion about things that you don't really know much about personally, but you had to get up to speed for class. You're there with Darden faculty, obviously incredible teachers. You're with really smart, talented classmates. And you're able to contribute, and you're able to offer value to those conversations. And I've been struck by how empowering that is for what to me seems like a group of really successful people, and yet they feel even more capable as a result of that. Or it's affirming for them in a way that maybe they haven't been affirmed at another juncture in their career. Maybe it sounds weird, but I wasn't expecting to necessarily hear that. I think we all know sort of the power of the case method, but I had somehow missed that. And it sounds like that's true to your experience.
Absolutely, and it's. I mean, obviously, we all sit in different seats, and as an admissions person in your role, I see you're just talking to so many smart people all the time. You're like, of course you're smart, but it's one of those things like I'd even say that about my classmates. Of course they're all smart, but there's part of it that's where you're so self-critical sometimes, and you're like, do I have what it takes, right? Am I smart enough? And it's just a very validating experience. Both, I mean, literally getting grades back, right? And you're like, oh, I passed this class, right? And I passed all my classes. What a day. And then also, just talking with somebody really smart, and then like realizing that you have something that you just really added and impacted their way they thought about things.
No, and so again, thank you for bringing that up. And many of our listeners may be struggling with this idea of like, you know, okay, it's an MBA program. There are talented people there. You know, can I contribute? And I think sort of the other side of what you just said is, yes, you can. Everybody, you know, I think there's this moment when people first show up and we talk about it, sort of imposter syndrome, where everybody thinks somehow all the other people in the class deserve to be there. They're the one person that kind of slipped in. And the thing that we try to say up front, but I think it's also relevant for this conversation, is you belong here. That's right. This is a place where many different people can be successful. There's no one right background. There's no one right sort of prior sort of, you have to have taken these classes. You know, lots of different backgrounds, industries, kinds of people in the room, all learning from each other.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I mean, the course content we cover and the breadth of things we cover, no one can really be an expert in all those things. But as we've been sort of winding down the program, I've been asking my classmates sort of what they got out of it. And so many of them are just like, I didn't think I'd have, I have a military background. And so I didn't think I knew business, but I got out of it that I can do this stuff and I can succeed in these spaces. And that's just been a really, I think, powerful thing for a lot of my classmates, including me.
Well, Stephen, thank you again. It's been great talking with you. Good luck with your business. One more plug for Weir Consulting here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fractional CFO based out of Richmond, but certainly willing to be in other places. We're looking to serve organizations that have, budgets a little bit, revenue less than $30 million, but more than, with any sense of financial complexity. So the website is Weir Consulting, www.weir, which is weird without the D, so WEIR, consulting.com. And if anyone's interested in talking, both from a client perspective, but also from a entrepreneurial perspective or a collegial perspective, I'd be more than happy to have those conversations.
Yeah, and all of our Grateful Dead fans who listen will know exactly how to spell your last name.
That's right, Bob Weir. Yep.
No relation?
No relation. There's just enough Weirs out there that I don't think I'm related to all of them, but it's uncommon enough, and I do love to say weird without the D. So yeah.
Well, thanks again, Stephen, and good luck with your last day of classes here on this weekend residency. Look forward to having y'all back in Roslyn soon.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Brad. It's been a privilege.
And that was my conversation with Stephen Weir, an Executive MBA format student in our class of 2020. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's ExecMBA, at darden.virginia.edu. And until next time, thanks for listening.